ask the panelists to join me on the stage. It will be a discussion on recent development in the regulatory landscape, and we will learn from examples in those jurisdictions where something new is got to be told. So like the Netherlands, where they established a new licensing regime almost a year ago. We will also learn from Sweden, from the Netherlands, I told you, from Malta, and of course from Cyprus. And if time allows, I will add a few words on Germany. So I like to ask Mr. Brandon Debatissta, Mr. Alan Littler, Mrs. Maria Vinberg, and Mrs. Christina Christoforou, to join me on this panel. So you'll be keen to know who's sitting next to me, and I'll start with my immediate right. Usually it's ladies first, but this time ladies be honored to get a special introduction. Mr. Brandon Debatissta, you are the head of legal and regulatory, and you've been working with the Maltese Gaming Authority, the MGA, for more than 5 years now. Your main areas are general legal and regulatory affairs, whilst also being heavily involved in matters relating to innovative technology, such as blockchain, AI, and esports. I know that the MGA is always striving into future topics, future developments, so it's a pleasure to have you here on board. Next to you is Alan Littler. Alan is a familiar face for this conference, not his first time here, like many others as well. Alan works at the Gaming and Gambling Practice Group of Katz Fransen, which is a leading law firm, probably say the leading law firm in the Netherlands, in Amsterdam. They were recently very, very busy in guiding clients through the process of applying for a gaming license. And as indicated before, that market has been opened in April 21. And I'm keen to learn about your experience, how it worked in that emerging jurisdiction with 1 year of experience. Next to Alan, I'm happy to welcome Maria Vinberg. Do I pronounce this right? Is it Vinberg? Thank you. She's the expert investigator in responsible gambling at the Swedish Gambling Authority. Maria is not a lawyer, thankfully, but she has her education in public health, which offers a good contribution to this panel, of course. Last but not least, Christina Christoforou. By the way, I take the opportunity not only addressed to you, but also to the whole team, to thank you very much for professionally organizing this conference in terms of topics, speakers, and everything, which is logistic. It's a real progress always. It's really well done. Christina has been working with the National Betting Authority for the last 5 years, and she's now head of the Safer Gambling Operation Department and International Relations Directorate. Congratulations, welcome again. And now we're in the middle of our discussion. And I would start with Brandon, because Malta is always good for something that probably is way ahead of other jurisdictions in developing regulation. Brandon, would you like to give us a brief overview of the amendments of the recently published consultation, the Player Protection Directive, based on the consultation regarding Player Protection Directive some weeks ago, in particular the most salient changes to the directive which we had before. Malta is introducing new regulation, a bit advanced. What is the main topic? What can we learn from Malta?
Yeah. So first of all, thank you for the introduction, and also to the organizers of this panel for inviting me. So yes, the MGA has been pretty busy the last couple of weeks with the publication of the consultation document relating to the Player Protection Directive, which, as I'm sure some of you may know, is a key legislative instrument when it comes to regulating RG in Malta. So basically, just to give you a bit of context with respect to the amendments, these are essentially the products of extensive research carried out by the RG team, which was set up the last couple of years to help the MGA implement its RG strategy, and also through the engagement of third-party expertise, where basically these experts actually analyzed the Player Protection Directive and provided us with insight as to how it can be improved. And these led to a number of amendments, but obviously for the sake of time, I'll be focusing on the most notable ones. Starting off with policies and procedures. Now, the requirement for operators to have policies and procedures, robust and effective policies and procedures, has always been there. But through these amendments, we clarified further what we expect from our operators, including, now it's specifically stated in the law, that operators need to take into consideration their product offering and also the risks emanating from such products. These need to be properly documented and reflected in the policies and procedures. Moreover, a certain level of detail is now expected when it comes to certain circumstances or instances that might arise, and which might prompt the operator to take certain actions, including the need to initiate a conversation with the player, and in more graver circumstances, the need to intervene and impose mandatory limits, and also in graver circumstances, excluding the player outright. So yes, again, these obligations were already there in more generic terms rather, but now we clarified more as to what we expect from our operators when it comes to policies and procedures. The most notable amendment, in my opinion, with respect to the consultation document that we published, is the one relating to markers of harm, where for the first time we actually introduced markers of harm in the law. Now, this list is not exhaustive, and operators are still expected to come up with markers of harm that reflect their particular business model. But through the research that was carried out by our RG team, and also as a result of a number of familiarization visits that we carried out, where we had the opportunity to sit down with operators and actually have discussions with respect to best practices, etc., we identified 5 markers of harm which we deem to be objective in nature and are applicable to any type of business model that is licensed by the MGA. Now, these markers of harm consist in 5, namely are an increase in the frequency and the amount of deposits and wagers, the cancellation of withdrawals pending the processing of that withdrawal, communication-based indicators, such as, for example, multiple requests for bonuses, the use of multiple payment methods, and pretty straightforward is the use of RG tools. Now, these by themselves are not necessarily evidence of problematic behavior, but through these amendments we ensure that there's a level of consistency when it comes to markers of harm and also what operators do when they encounter this type of behavior, basically, and that is now introduced in the law. We also introduced another amendment relating to real money reinforcement, where now operators are obliged to disclose the real money value of fictitious currency. For example, certain operators might use gold coins, diamonds, gems, or whatever instead of traditional currency. And now the law obliges operators to disclose the value of such currencies at critical stages, including during deposit stage and also in any history report or statistical data that is requested by the player from the operator. So that basically sums up the most notable ones. Obviously, there have been other tweaks to the law in order to improve the overall clarity of the directive and to what we expect from operators. But for now, we have opted to not roll out everything at once. We have other amendments planned down the line, and most notably guidance rather than amendments in the sector. But the plan is to carry out more familiarization visits at this moment in time, so that we have further opportunities to sit down with our operators and discuss the manner in which they are using their data, they're collecting their data in the first place, and how they're using it, and also, again, best practice, since ultimately we deem our operators to be experts in the field, since they have the data, they interact mostly with the customers. So before proceeding with updating the framework further, we want to have this opportunity to actually make better informed decisions going forward.
One question, I think that is really advanced, but in particular the markers of harm, You mentioned 5 categories or 5 indicators.
5 indicators.
Do you also provide some sort of guidance for the operators or how to measure when we reach a level or a tier when action is needed? So certain percentage or a certain combination?
The law is quite general in that respect, and we still expect operators to come up with their policies and procedures rather than us telling them when they need to intervene. As discussed in the other panels as well, problematic behavior isn't something which is constant. So, and at the moment in time, we don't feel that we are informed enough to actually intervene and take those decisions ourselves, since again, the data is held by the operators and we deem them to be the most knowledgeable when it comes to but again, it's important to us to issue guidance, and we acknowledge that. And again, this is just the start.
Right. It will be very interesting to monitor that.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Brendan. Maria, in Sweden, well, in 2019, the market was opened, and up to now, you've got 70 licenses for online betting and casinos. There are 2 state-owned casinos, land-based casinos in Sweden, and 16 smaller land-based operations. Can you share with us the structure of the Swedish regulation or the Swedish gambling laws, in particular regarding safer gambling, of course?
Yes, safe gambling is... you can find safe gambling in 3 different laws: the gambling law, the ordinance, and the regulations that we have written ourselves. That is the general advice on responsible gambling. And it's fairly easily read. For me, who started with this for a year and a half now, and had not, as I'm not a lawyer, this was my first insight into how to regulate responsible gambling. I've been working with gambling for quite some time, but not with the laws. And I found them very straightforward. And having listened today, I just want to say that this is also something that all the things that we have talked about today is also written in our regulation, coming to time limit setting and bonus, and for each article. And it's quite easy to supervise, I would say, which is essential.
Right, thank you very much. Just one question with respect to evaluating success, quality of measures applied to protect players. Is there something like a frequent evaluation of the law, of the regulation and the market, where you try to review numbers, compare probably, if you have access to such figures, if there is traffic going outside of the market, and consult with the industry to probably see if there's reason to change things? Do you do this frequently, or is this just something that will happen in the near future at some point?
I would say both. I wouldn't describe what we are doing now as a structure evaluation, ongoing evaluation, in the sense that we are measuring the effects of each thing. We have proceeded so far that we have done supervision on a different article, like bonuses, and now also the duty of care. And so that will fill in the gaps that we need to know, like where is the limit? How are we going to interpret this specific article? And that is necessary. So there we have and of course they have been appealed. So they are now in the first grade of our court, and there was a decision in all these cases. So this is a guideline for the companies, of course, how to proceed in these particular articles. But we also have this continuous conversation, or not conversation, but it's meetings with the companies to discuss issues that comes up. And particularly when we came to this, concerning this article with duty of care.
Are you happy with your license industry? Because we see news not from Sweden, maybe UK and others, where huge fines were imposed against operators.
Yep.
Recently in September, 70 million, I think it was British pound, against one operator for failures against responsible gaming, also AML regulation back in 2020. Do you have similar issues in Sweden, or would you say they're almost compliant?
I would say it's similar, we have a frame law, and that means that we are supposed to do this. This is what our government expects us to do supervision on each item, to actually proceed in how it's going to be interpreted. So we are going to both have high fines because they are regulated in relation to the earnings, the turnover for the companies. So they look very high, but it's in proportion to their own turnover.
Thank you very much. Christina, Cyprus has recently very progressively introduced your players' protection regulations. What's the main change that the regulation will bring, and what else have you been working on? So constantly reviewing and changing and improving things.
Yeah, so we just recently published the regulations for the protection of players, vulnerable groups, and pathological players, or players protection regulations. And we wanted to codify the emerging best practices from the field of safer gambling, as well as explore new ideas in safer gambling, in order to enhance the sustainability of the market and manage the shift in expectations both from the players, the operators, and the public in general. So we set down the minimum requirements in 4 areas: information to the players, the tools they have in their disposal, the limits they can set, and also the protection of minors. I'll just quickly mention some of the major changes. So one of the changes is the proximity to information. So now the total net balance of the player needs to be no more than 1 click away. Also, the player needs to have prominent access to their history. Also, we have set down mandatory deposit limits that need to be set during registration or on first login. And we also have like a universal web address that ends the same for all operators. So it's .com.cy/measures. So the player knows that wherever whichever operator they choose to play with, they always can go to the .cy/measures and find the available tools to them. And this needs to be no more than 2 clicks away. And then we also introduced some new provisions for the land-based operators. So we have age verification, it's made more strict. So anyone that looks younger than 25 years old, they need to, the operators need to check their IDs. And also the betting premises need to have unobstructed view on the inside. And we also have like other changes such as betting slip signposting on the back of the betting slip, and then requirements for the website of the operator. So they need to have include information on safer gambling, include information on where to get help, a self-assessment questionnaire, so these things. And then a major change was the introduction of risk profiling and categorization of players. So the operator needs to base any interaction they have with a player, it needs to be based on the risk profile of that player. So we haven't defined like clear markers on how to do categorization of players. We didn't want to be prescriptive, and we wanted to be quite flexible with it. I see Brandon is really, you're agreeing. So we wanted to give the chance, because we have both local and international operators, we want to give them the chance. It's a learning curve for both of us, the operator and the regulator. So at some point we will introduce KPIs and of course specific criteria and parameters. But at the moment we really want the operators to prove the effectiveness of those measures, be able to prove that they actually they actually work. So basically the regulations, we want it to be flexible, we want it to be adaptive and be proactive rather than reactive, because a lot of times the regulators are accused that are being reactive and rather than proactive. So a lot of the regulation, the majority of the content has the option for us to draft a directive. So basically that's for the players' protection regulations. We're also now at the last stages of implementing our national exclusion platform. It's built so to be future-proof. So as our chairwoman mentioned this morning, we want to include in the near future, we want to, it has the opportunity, the possibilities, this platform, to include people that are automatically, they take employment benefits, unemployment benefits, or people that are diagnosed with gambling disorder, immediately they are included in the list, or even people with conflict of interest, such as athletes that cannot bet on their sports. So the last piece of, it's not a regulation, it's more of a strategic direction. We through our newly established safer gambling strategy, we take it through a public health lens. So it's not just the players, but we're looking like the gambling-related harms to the affected others, and if we safeguard the players, if we safeguard the protection, the safety and the health of affected others, then it's a holistic approach to be able to protect society as a whole from any negative consequences of gambling and keep it a fun activity.
Pretty much going into the detail. One question, because I found this very interesting. So if I'm unemployed and I'm trying to assess a land-based casino, I will have no access because I'm automatically listed in that player-bearing system that applies to all sectors, I assume, of the gambling industry?
So the National Exclusion Platform at the moment, it's built, it's going to function for the online betting operators. And it has built-in features like that they give the possibility in the future to include these vulnerable groups of people, and of course expand in other gambling areas in Cyprus.
Right, thank you very much. Alan, the Netherlands, a bit more than 1 year experience with licensed industry. What are the key regulatory requirements from responsible gaming regulation in your country?
Sure, actually I think there were quite some similarities to what I've just heard coming from Cyprus, although there's no proposal to exclude those who are benefits from the license regime. But yeah, as you noted, the market has been opened for just over a year now. It opened on the 1st of October 2021. There are now 22 licenses have been awarded, 22 license holders, because only one license per entity. Not all licenses are active, there are quite a few dormant ones at the moment. But fortunately, maybe the Gambling Authority knew this conference was going to take place. They published a report on the first year on Friday, so I was able to take a quick look at that. And so in the first year, we have 1.5 million accounts and 563,000 active accounts, and the estimated monthly loss on average is €153. And apparently the gross gaming revenue is at about 81 million per month at the moment. So that's the market in its infancy. There are new entrants over the horizon. There are also new restrictions on advertising over the horizon. But for now, I'm just going to turn to the restrictions, or the measures rather, that operators have to take. So of course, there's also a duty of care to prevent gambling addiction to the greatest extent possible. But the regulations don't leave it to the operators to determine or interpret that requirement, but are quite specific in what operators, and also to an extent the Gambling Authority, have to do. So during the registration process, there's also the requirement that players must set limits for the time spent, deposits, and also the total credit on their account. So if I say I don't want more than €500 on my account, I have a lucky day, I win 1,000, then 500 is automatically withdrawn without my intervention to my bank account or my nominated bank account. So that also then ensures basically that the players don't have credit sitting on their account, but it gets automatically paid out. So the registration can't be completed until that has been processed, apart from the standard age verification, identity verification, and so forth. Operators are also under an explicit obligation to monitor player behaviour. So, for example, duration and frequency of participation, which games should players participate in, are they changing their limits, and so forth. The regulations are also pretty detailed in terms of the measures, the RG measures, which operators must be able to implement. So, okay, the more basic stuff, or the earlier intervention measures, if you like, providing players with insight into their behaviour, providing them with further information, but also taking more invasive action, some would say. For example, not only advising players to set limits or change their limits, but also taking action without the player's consent, for example, excluding them from particular games for particular periods of time, and then also excluding the player from the whole offer at the operator's level, recommending that they register themselves in the nationwide exclusion database that covers remote but also casinos and the land-based arcade sector. And there's also the opportunity, there's also the possibility for operators to say to the gambling authority, this player represents a harm to themselves, they haven't listened to us about taking adequate responsible gambling measures, we've done everything we can, they should go into the exclusion register, they haven't voluntarily registered on our advice, please involuntarily exclude them. But we haven't seen yet how that's going to pan out in practice. And then for every intervention that an operator takes, they cannot offer a player a bonus for a certain period of time afterwards. So, for example, if you provide a player with information about their behaviour, you can't offer them a bonus for 30 days. And then the more severe the intervention, the longer the restrictions. So maybe you can't offer a bonus for 60 or 90 days. And if a player's been excluded, you can't offer them a bonus for 12 months after the exclusion has ended. So there are quite a few prescriptive requirements. But even before an operator gets to that stage, during the license application process, they have to provide a whole swathe of policies, and two which are relevant for here are the advertising policies and the addiction prevention policy. And perhaps differently to other jurisdictions, an operator must have conducted primarily by a third party a so-called risk assessment or a risk analysis, and that analysis has to, on the basis of scientific methodology, analyse the risks associated with the games which the operator intends to offer, and that risk analysis then has to feed back into the addiction prevention policy. And at this stage, it's not just the operator doing this in their offices, they also have to engage with two experts at the local level. One, basically an expert in gambling addiction and prevention thereof, and also an expert, a so-called experiential expert, so essentially somebody who has gone through and suffered from problem gambling, excessive gambling in the past, and that person also has to be able to give their input into the policy. So I assume that the hope is that these policies will be more effective rather than just a paper-based exercise if there hadn't been this input.
That's very insightful. I want you to prepare a short answer to or a comment.
Yes.
The fact that there is a call for a total advertising ban in the Netherlands. I think it's interesting for everyone. But before we do that, I thought that we have some questions, and I wanted to use the time now to first take these questions and finally get back to you regarding advertising. So can we have the questions, please? Here we go. It's, do you believe that mandatory registration process of customers for land-based, maybe with cards similar to casinos, would help to control more the safer gambling process and identify problematic players that are now invisible? So it's not addressed to someone specific. Who would like to answer this? Probably Christina, maybe? Oh, yes, please.
I think we are probably going towards a kind of mandatory registration for casinos. At least we some part of us at the authorities is now suggesting that. I think it's a good way to go, because otherwise it's going to be very difficult to help people who's showing a problematic, and identify and showing a problematic gambling problem, I would say.
Right. Would you like to add something?
I would say short answer, yes, of course it will help, because we talked so much about customer interaction, risk categorization on players' behavior, etc. But it does come with a lot of obstacles in doing so. I'm not talking about casinos, I'm talking about...
I think it's an inspiring question, because we have to define what registration means. Is it only verification or identification, showing your passport and being checked against the player-bearing system, or is it more like in the online sphere? Thanks for that question. Do we have more questions? No more questions? Fine. Then I have that final question for you, Alan. There's a call to advocate in favor of a total advertising ban in the Netherlands. Surprising me? What's behind it?
This call has been aired since the end of last year, so immediately after the market opened, some new operators went crazy with advertising, particularly on TV, and there were some quite annoying adverts as well, not just the quantity. This also includes the two state monopolies who have a monopoly in the land-based who went online. And they basically annoyed Parliament, and the parliamentarians pushed the government for a ban on advertising. There is a proposal for a ban on untargeted advertising, and that sets the threshold so high that it is a de facto complete ban. But there's been a lot of pushback in the consultation process, so it'll be interesting to see whether the ministry sticks to such a high standard as it has proposed. There's a lot of good argumentation from a legal perspective. But it's also interesting because during the preparation for the Act, which came into force on the 1st of April last year, and what I've just been referring to, advertising was seen as a key element within all the appropriate boundaries and so forth, of course, to channel players to the legal offer so they can distinguish from the illegal. But now the minister seems to have said, oh, that doesn't really matter so much. We don't have any evidence of problem gambling within the new regime. Of course, there may be problems from before it was introduced. But nevertheless, there's going to be a complete ban. So it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Thank you very much, Alan. Thank you very much, my panelists. Please join me in thanking my panelists for their excellent contributions again. Thank you.